Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to the Quintasia podcast. And my name is Gregory Q. Jenkins from Quintasia Studios. And my guest today is Jennifer Betit Yen. She's an actor, writer, and producer, and the president of the Film Lab. So please welcome Jennifer to the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So Jennifer, let's dive in here. I think the audience will be, for those that may not be of our viewers and listeners that may not be familiar with you, they'll find that you have a very interesting background, and we have similar passions, if you will. And I think those of you, you're in for a treat today, everyone. So tell us about the challenges you've faced in your career and in terms of getting, as a person of color, finding work, and what do you think some of the hurdles have been for you?
Yeah, so we're talking about acting as my primary position, and
Yes.
When I started, I ran off to Los Angeles, and I was like, "This is gonna be awesome!" And I think one of my first auditions was for Vietnamese manicurist number 4. I'm not Vietnamese. And I went in and they said, "Can you just speak Vietnamese?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not Vietnamese." And they said, "Oh, just make something up." And I only knew a few words in Mandarin. So I thought, well, why don't we do that? And they were like, "That's brilliant, great, terrific." And I was like, this is terrible. One of the big bummers kind of is going out and, all of us that have studied theater, we want to do these classical meaty roles. We're like, oh, wouldn't it be great to play Juliet and Romeo and Juliet and all these things. But people of color are consistently shut out from those opportunities. And it's not until sort of recently that we've seen some more non-traditional casting, but even in so-called non-traditional casting, look at the very phrase non-traditional. Like, it's sort of like, oh, this is weird. This is a niche thing. This is something we should put aside. And so really putting us, and when I say us, I mean people of color, and then particularly it's kind of a double whammy if you're a woman of color, because female roles, regardless, white women too, when you look at the portrayal of women in TV and film, it's primarily as sexy, stupid, or silent. I call them the 3 S's. And if you're not one of those things, then you have far fewer opportunities. So I think that the big hurdles are just trying to find those opportunities. And then you kind of get to a point where, and I think you two both know this very well, where you begin to create your own opportunities because you don't want to be Vietnamese manicurist number 4 anymore.
I think it's sad that, that's what we're relegated to, is roles like that. Is, we don't even warrant a character name. We're just, number 4 or waiter number 2 or something like that. And that's, why we are Quintasia. We're here. Let me, for those of you who may have not joined us at the top of the podcast, you are listening to the Quintasia podcast. And now I'm going to turn it over to our controller. For those of you who have listened to a few of our programs, you know how we roll. It's our leadership team talking with various guests. Once again, today we're talking with Jennifer Betit Yen from the Film Lab. And I'm going to turn it over now to our controller, Randy Wang. Take it away, Randy.
Thank you, Greg. Jennifer, thank you again for joining us today. So my first question for you is, so, growing up Chinese American, myself in the US, my parents always stressed like the importance of academics and education, right? Like, culturally, we were always told to become, lawyers or doctors or go into accounting, because those are not only safe professions, but also well respected in the community. So I'm just curious on how your family reacted when you decided to tell them that you were going to pursue a career in the arts as opposed to law.
Yeah, so I'm mixed. My dad is Chinese American. His parents immigrated here from Shanghai, and then my mom is French Irish. So and they were both kind of hippies. So they were actually, I'm going to use that phrase again, non-traditional. They were like, do whatever you want. We really don't care. So it's one of the few people, I think, that didn't have parents that were like, what a terrible idea. But I should also add that, so I went to college. I studied political science and theater arts because I guess I thought I was going to be like a waitress in DC. I don't know. Um, but but then my like around my senior year of college, when my fellow acting students were going out and they were doing auditions for theater in New York, because that was kind of the thing at the time. You know, you're going to go to New York and you're going to be on stage. One of my theater professors said, you know, I really love you, and I'm telling you this because I love you. There are just not roles for Asian women. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to go out with every other Asian woman for Miss Saigon, and that's it. And then even if you get it, that's the only role you're going to play. And I pulled out, you know, the stats and I looked at them, and she was kind of right. I was like, you know what? I need like a pause. So I went to law school. So my parents were probably like, oh, good. Like,
Yeah.
but you know, I still went back to acting.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, it's interesting because, in the community, we never really see that. Like if I were to tell my parents that, they would think I was crazy, or like, they would tell me to go move in with some other parents, things like that. So, so can you give our viewers and listeners a little insight on how you got involved with the film lab?
Yeah. So I started acting in Boston. Then I got a film that made the circuit, went to Los Angeles. Kind of through circuitous routes, I came to New York City. And when I came to New York, there was an Asian American group from Cornell that reached out. I went to undergrad at Cornell. So they reached out and they said, hey, a Cornellian founded this group back in 1998 called the Film Lab. And they're really great about promoting Asian Americans and, really cutting edge scripts and things like that. They run this program that is this workshop series called Unfinished Works for screenplays by writers of color, and they tend to cast actors of color. You should participate in one of the feedback sessions, and you should bring your headshot and resume because you're going to meet a ton of writers. You're just coming to the city, it'd be great networking. And I was like, brilliant. So I brought my little headshot and resume and I ran over there. And then I'm listening to all these screenplay workshops and these writers and these actors. And I thought, these people are amazing. Like, this isn't some little group. This is really a lot of talent. And one of the things, people joke about in the entertainment industry is everybody's like, I'm going to make a movie. You want to make a movie with me? Let's make a movie. And nothing ever happens. Let's do lunch. Never. But my very, I don't know if it was the first time I went, but, really early on, one of the people in the group approached me and he said, would you want to co-produce a film? I have a role for you in it. We could do this. And I thought, sure, that's what we'll do. I wrote the script, and it's like, it's a great script. Like, I mean, I would do it. And so I said, yeah, I would love to do it, but I still thought he's gonna, it's not really gonna happen. But it did. And I was so impressed with how the vast majority of the people I met through the lab were really go-getters. They were really like, let's do this, and let's not just do it, not just sort of naked ambition, but let's do this in a collaborative sense. Let's bring each other up. Let's try to help as many people as we can, and let's put out a positive message all while we're at it. And I thought, these people are amazing. So I went to the then president, Carl Kaholi, and I was like, how can I help? Because the work you guys are doing is just so needed and so awesome, and you're creating such a great community, and I'd love to help. And he said, well, we need somebody to help plan some parties. Can you plan some parties? And I was like, so I did, and I think I did that for like a year. I worked with the management team, and then they decided, the board at the time decided they wanted to sort of see if the lab could get bigger and grow a little bit more. And they were kind of deciding between a couple of different people, but then they came to me with the offer. They said, would you like to lead it? And I said, sure.
Yes.
So yeah, and that was in 2012. But the lab itself has been around since '98, so it's been going strong for quite a while.
So, being that the lab's been around for a while, what do you think is the overall mission of the Film Lab?
Well, the overall mission is to the promotion and support of gender and ethnic parity in mainstream television and film and entertainment programming generally. And when we look at that, when we talk about gender and racial parity, a lot of times we look at it sort of like an inverted triangle of the traditional mainstream power structure. So generally in mainstream media, like if we're looking at major TV or film studios or even mid-major studios, we're looking at over 90% of C-level positions being held by white people. And then that over 80% being held by men. So it's a really white male dominated, that's the lens the stories are being told through. Those are the stories that are being pulled. Those are the projects that are being greenlit. And so what we try to do is invert that. So it's not that we say no white men allowed. It's just that we prioritize least represented voices.
Right. No, that's very interesting. And with that, I'm going to pass it over back to Greg.
And once again, to our listeners and viewers out there, this is the Quintage Report podcast, and we're having a great conversation today. So if you're like us and you're out there and you're wondering, well, gee, why don't I see more of this? Why aren't more people of color involved in content creation? I hope you listen to this conversation, because we're talking about the people who are going out there and getting it done. That's one of my biggest things is if you're passionate about something, if you're especially talking to the writers out there, you don't need permission to write your story. You can go ahead and write your story, and then if you believe in that, you can go ahead and try to make that thing, bring it into existence. We all know it's not going to be easy. That's a given. It's not really easy for anyone. It's especially not easy for us, because when it comes to the financing end of it, it's hard to get investors to believe that no, this is not a charitable thing. You're going to actually make money with this, because believe it or not, there are people out there who want to see people of color in films and on television. So it's not a money-losing proposition. So that's really what the heart of our conversation is about today, and we're enjoying it. And thank you again for being here with us. So let me ask you this. Now, in looking at the film labs, you have different programs. Can you talk a little bit about the different programs that the film lab offers?
Yeah, sure. And actually, if I could swing back, Greg, to one other thing you said that I just love and I think is so
Sure.
Good point. You mentioned that people want content. They want entertainment content with people of color. So true. Actually, especially if you look at millennials, and if we're talking about money, then advertisers focus on millennials. That's where they're wanting to focus their ad spend on. Millennials, by a huge number, are choosing. They're actually flittering away from the major networks, and they are selecting content that is diverse content. Whether they're doing it intentionally or unintentionally, I couldn't say, but that's the content that they want. They seem to want content that more accurately reflects the very diverse world around them. Right. But then I just forgot your question. I got so excited about what you said.
No problem. I was asking about the programs that the film lab has. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So we still have the Unfinished Works program, which is how I originally got involved, when I ran in with my little headshot, which is a program for writers and actors to sort of connect them. We have an actor directory filled with actors of all colors, and we connect them with screenwriters who apply to the Unfinished Works program. And then the actors do a table read of a screenplay in progress. And sometimes we've done plays, but mostly it's television and film. Yeah, sure. So we still have the Unfinished Works program, which is how I originally got involved, when I ran in with my little headshot, which is a program for writers and actors to sort of connect them. We have an actor directory filled with actors of all colors, and we connect them with screenwriters who apply to the Unfinished Works program. And then the actors do a table read of a screenplay in progress. And sometimes we've done plays, but mostly it's television and film. The writer gets to see his work read by professional actors, and then the public gets to be involved. in the creative process, in helping to guide the writer, give their feedback and thoughts, and guide the writer in how she or he will continue, finish, edit, modify, etc. per his script, which is kind of exciting. So that's the Unfinished Works program. And then we have what is arguably probably our best known program, which is the 72-hour film shootout. That is, thinking it's like 20th year, and it's a filmmaking competition. The registration opens every year in March, and then the actual competition happens in June. That filmmakers are given a theme upon which all the films must be based, and they have 3 days to complete these films. We require that at least one lead actor and at least one key cast member be of Asian descent, because other than Native Americans, Asian Americans are the least represented group in television and film. And then we give sort of bonus points the more diverse everything is. You know, we don't want just sort of a homogenous cast and crew. We want diversity. Then we partner with folks at ABC. Marcy Phillips, who's the executive director of casting for ABC Primetime, is our longest running judge. She's been with us since the beginning. And then she gives a meeting to the best actor and actress afterwards. And then we partnered with folks from NBC and HBO and all kinds of people. But the goal, so the judges judge the films, they give them scores, we figure out the winners of all these different categories, best actor, actress, director, writer, etc. And one of my favorite parts is that the prizes are mentorships with executives at major networks, so that we can really help people to launch their career, to get some doors open that might not have been open for them before. And then the top 10 films screen at the Asian American International Film Festival in New York City in the summer.
That's really great to hear. I can't stress enough the importance of mentorship, and you know that's part of what, you know, even though we're a young company, as we try to blaze a trail for ourselves, we also believe that it's important that we open the pathway for others behind us. That, you know, all the lessons that we're learning, that we're passing that along to the next generation of diverse filmmakers. So Randy and I were actively talking about, and I talked to you a little bit about it, our internship program that we want to do. And one of our ideas is we want, you know, we don't just want people coming in and making copies and all that kind of stuff. We want to really give young people, even if they're not necessarily thinking of, you know, film or television as a career, we want to expose them to, you know, all facets of it, including the business side of it. Because I think, you know, a lot of people focus on the creative side, which is, of course, that's the fun part. But if you're not good at the business side of it, you know, after you make your film, you got to do something with it. Because you want to make another one. And if you don't do something with that can earn you some money, it's going to be very hard, you know, then to go on to, you know, an even bigger project. So that's the kind of stuff that we want to talk to people about and, you know, train them on. And I think back to, you know, I can't tell you how, if the things that I know now, if I knew 25 years ago, that would have been very helpful. And
Absolutely.
we're big believers in, you know, we search out short films because, you know, many times people of color do not have access to the financing to do, you know, larger projects, full feature projects. So we think that short films are going to be a great way that we introduce an audience to these new filmmakers. But I have to turn away people a lot of times because they didn't do the legal stuff correctly.
Right.
Like if they included music in it, you know, you have to have the right licenses. Otherwise, I can't do anything with it. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be teaching people, you know, in the internship that we hope to launch this year. So we share your mission on that.
Yeah, that's
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about the future. And I'm going to kind of, you know, cut this in two pieces. First, let's talk about Jennifer, the actor. what would you like to see for yourself? What would you like the future to hold for you?
I think just as most actors I know, just continuity of work, because it can tend to be sort of drought or flood. You know, you'll have a ton of projects, and actually, strangely, 2020, knock on wood, was actually a great year for me. But then sometimes you'll have periods of drought where you're like, ah! And so then that's just like kind of, learning to sort of be calm, be cool, to enjoy that stillness, to be like, you know what, this is actually nice. And I can use this opportunity to take classes and to network and to do all the things, create my own projects and do all the things I didn't have time for when I was working. But I think continuity of work that would be great. It can be done.
So, Randy, you have anything you wanted to follow up with?
Yeah, just curious. So if, for our viewers and our listeners who've just tuned in, if you had to give them one message, or if you wanted to leave them one message with them, what would it be?
It would be to remember that you're not an island, and that everyone around you is a potential friend, a potential collaborator, a potential helper, and to always have compassion for those that are around you. And I think that when you help others up with you, it will actually benefit you as well.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, we could all use a little bit more compassion, especially in the world that we're living in right now.
Yes, I agree.
And that's one one of the reasons why we're doing this cast is we're building our community. We're building a community of like-minded souls, and it's just started, but it has worked out. So I'm very pleased with it, and I can confess that I was not exactly on board with the idea when it was first proposed, but Randy and some of the other members of my team convinced me that
I mean,
that
I think. Sorry, Greg, I didn't mean to cut you
no,
off.
go ahead.
I think what we wanted to the message we wanted to get out there was we wanted to create a safe place and a safe space. I think that's also part of the mission of the company itself is, not only do we want to see people of color in front of the camera, but also behind the camera. We want to give people an opportunity to succeed, regardless of, where they're from, who they are, what they have access to. So I think the podcast is also just, if you're having a tough time, you can tune in, you can listen, you can say, oh, wow, other people are going through the same issues. There's others out there like me. They might not look like me, but they're like me.
Yeah, I love that.
The more that I talk to people, I'm just struck by how similar our experiences are in terms of the struggle. We're all overnight successes in the making, usually 10 plus years of quote unquote overnight success is in the making. And this is a grind, but we do it because, we're passionate about what we do. And what we do does have the potential to change people's lives, if we do it well.
Right.
For sure.
So that's our motivation.
Yeah, and I love that you say that, because that's so important, because so often, especially in entertainment, people think of it as like, oh, these sweet little artists, but it's very cutthroat. It's very, very competitive. And there can be a tendency to think of it as like, oh, well, I actually had a white woman say to me, oh, it's so unfair that there's all this diverse casting right now because you guys are basically taking my roles. And I was like, well, it's my world, lady. But, but I think that it's really important to not look at it that way, to not look at it like this was my role and you took it. Like, it's much better to look at it the way Greg just did, which is to say, we are all going through this together. We have this foundation, this same foundation that we're all coming from, going through this experience, and it will be so much better for all of us if we go through this experience in a way that is, as Randy said, compassionate and safe, and where we're bringing people together and we're doing the best work we can possibly do. but also helping others to do the best work that they can possibly do.
Right.
And just in now I've been doing projects I've done mostly music type stuff. I was on that side of the business first, and then now I'm doing film and television. But um, when I started doing projects where I had to cast, we were just doing independent stuff, nothing no union stuff. It's just I was struck at the disparity both on in front of the camera and behind the camera when it comes to female participation. And one of the things that I'm uniquely mindful, particularly when it came to the cinematographers, I was just struck at, we got all of these applications from people to come in, but I got maybe two or three women who applied for that. Now I know that there are more than two or three women cinematographers out there, but I think it's a sad state of affairs that it's gotten to the point where people are probably saying to themselves, "What's the point of even applying? Because I'm not going to get it." Or if you have a role that is particularly designated for a female, I don't want, like when you talked about the cutthroat part of it, I don't want women fighting over the one, like the few scraps that are available. We should definitely have more equity. We are not perfect ourselves on that. We have to do better. But we are conscious of, and that's when we're the television show that we hope to bring forward, 3 out of the 4 leads are female. So that's how we start contributing to the conversations by, putting putting our money where our words are, if you will, and following up, letting our actions speak for what we really believe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important. Like when you talk about women or you talk about people of color, either way, we kind of get thrown into categories like, oh, that's the woman cinematographer. And then when we look at also just, I kind of like that, you mentioned, you said, I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect, right? How can we be when we're raised in a society that has latent racism and sexism? I mean, this is what we were born and bred on. So all of us have racism and sexism within us. And I think that kind of like what you said, that the key is really to look inside of ourselves and to catch those moments and to be like, oh, wait, time out. Let me try to fix myself. Because we, a lot of us well, we want to go out and clean everybody else's house, but we've got to clean our own house first. And I definitely, it's funny because I gave a talk for a network about sexism, particularly because we were working on a pilot about these women trying to get into venture capital, which is it's very hard, and women are treated very, very differently, and sort of the double standards. And then we were talking about not just double standards between men and women, like a man comes in and he's very flashy and very confident, and they're like, oh, he is really ambitious. He's a go-getter. Like, this guy is going to do it. He's going to perform. Let's fund him. And then a woman comes in. She's very flashy, and she's sort of the same way. And they're like, she is very full of herself. She is arrogant. She's kind of a whatever. Yeah. Like, now. Out. But then when you actually, and this is actually from a real study, this actually happened. So these researchers have been following these investors. And so then at the end, they brought their results to the investors. And interestingly, the investors were not evil people. They were not like, oh, we hate women. And they were horrified. Like when they saw what they had done in totality, when they had that bird's eye view, they were like, oh my God, we feel horrible. Like we really didn't mean to, because each situation, it's not like you're saying, oh, she's a woman and therefore forget that. She can't act like that. She's got to act sweet and nice. But then if she acts sweet and nice, then it's like, she's not going to be able to survive in this like very difficult, sharp-elbowed business. Can't fund her either. So you run into all these difficulties because of these sort of ingrained stereotypes.
I definitely, that's, from not just women, but same is true for particularly African-American men. When they're going for funding, if we come in and we're confident or whatnot, then he's arrogant, he's uppity. You get all of these things that, again, this unconscious bias. And I'm happy to see that there's a sort of a mini movement going on in like corporate programs, and this phrase unconscious bias is really, I guess, out of the whole situation with George Floyd. You had, racism there, um, you know, for all to see. You didn't really have to have a special win. It was right in your face, and it was shocking. The other interesting thing that was interesting to me, after the incident of the Capitol riots, instantly, and it wasn't people of color, of course we noticed it, but who made the comparison, but people who are not persons of color were saying, well, wow, if that was Black Lives Matter, I bet they wouldn't have been treated the same way if they were out there doing, all that rioting. So again, the contrast was so stark that, many people could see it. So I'm an eternal optimist when it comes to faith in human beings, and that's part of our mission. One of our goals and our tenets is of what we want to achieve in our entertainment is to remind people of their better angels, that good and evil is a choice.
Right.
What you decide that you want to be is a choice. And some of us don't get great starts. We don't have good parents. We come from horrible child rearing conditions, but those people somehow, some way, still can turn out. Now, everyone needs help along the way to be a well-adjusted human being, but we make choices and every time you choose to do evil, you're setting yourself on a path. And that's really one of the themes that you'll see in all the works that we do is, again, reminding people that there's a choice. So little philosophy.
Yeah, a lot of knowledge, right? It's knowledge and exposure, because a lot of times the communities that are very homogenous, for example, is where you see a lot more xenophobia or racism, and that's often because they simply have no exposure. And that's a place where I think that our industry, where entertainment really, really becomes very, very powerful in the roles that they're showing. Because if you see, for example, a Black man portrayed over and over again as a thug, dangerous, the perpetrator in the crime always, then you slowly, that sinks into your subconsciousness and you begin to believe it. And then you see a Black man on the street and you cross the street, so entertainment, it's not just fun and games. It's very important. The messages that it's putting out, the roles it's putting out, the stories it's telling. And there's a place for many different stories, but the problem is that by and large, the majority of stories that we're getting from major studios, even now, is still from a white male lens, and it can be the most, kind, sweet white male ever, but it's still from his lens. And we need to expand that, and we need to see stories from other lenses.
And I think the importance of it, like if people were to go to the Film Lab's website, and by the way, please let them know where that they can find the Film Lab.
It is www.film-lab.org.
So if you go to their website, you will see a video of Jennifer there, and she's at an awards dinner, New York City awards dinner, and she's talking about a subject that's near and dear to our hearts in terms of why diversity matters. And again, as you said, it's not that, you can have the most well-meaning intentioned person, leading a production, but it's important that we have diverse voices, because what happens when you don't have that, it perpetuates that perception that everybody else doesn't belong. Like we are the other. We are this, like, what doesn't belong? Oh, it's them. No, it's because our lens is skewed. You have that perception that, oh, it's only these kind of people. that matter, but that's not the case. That it's if we start entertainment, I think it has an enormously big role to play in terms of how we change this culture and how we move it to a more inclusive society. So it's critical that, we have more diverse people in the decision-making roles in Hollywood.
I so agree. And it's funny, like one of my favorite writers on this subject is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but he said, if white people spoke up every single time you hear a racist or sexist comment, you don't have to get in a fight, you don't have to be hostile or aggressive, but just speak up every single time, we would be done with it. We'd be done with racism and sexism. And I was actually thinking about that because I was on set and a director said, he kept saying Americans, but what he meant by Americans was white people. Because he's like, the Americans over here, everybody else over there. But he meant, because like, I'm an American. I mean, you two are both Americans. But he meant the white people be over there. And so I was like, and it's very hard for an actor on a set because we are, you want to absolutely respect the director at all times. But I went privately and I said, ha ha ha, you keep saying Americans, but American is a nationality, white is a race. So maybe you should say white people over there. And to his credit, he was like, oh, you know what, you're 100% right. I never thought of it that way. And he changed it from there on. And he was great. But sometimes it is just speaking up and people, and like we were talking about subconscious bias before, people don't even realize it. And so if you say it in the right way, that's friendly and open, then they're like, oh.
Right. And he'll probably never forget that in the future, right? Like he'll always be conscious of that and cognizant of that choice that he made, or to do it differently.
Yeah.
And I know for myself, I'm talking about, gender parity and diversity and all that stuff. And we were filming, we're on a set. One of the actors comes over to me and said, it was a part and basically said, no woman would ever say that. And when she finished, it gave me a perspective that of course, I could never have that perspective because I'm not a woman. And that is why having that perspective there, that's why women have to be in the writing room, not just to be nice and because you will tell a better story. We have to be, people of color have to be in the writing. You will tell a better story because you will get what makes entertainment real and believable. The more that it looks like real life, the more people get into it.
Right, the more accuracy.
The more accurate.
The more accuracy you have is key.
Is key, and you can't do that if you don't have diversity and inclusion before the camera and behind the camera. So that's definitely what we're all about. Well, I thank you so much for coming on this podcast. We hope that we will continue. Obviously, the relationship between Contagia and the Film Lab and yourself. Hopefully, we'll possibly maybe work together in some form and fashion in the future. I thank you so much for coming on our podcast today. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to the Quintasia podcast. Our guest today was Jennifer Betit Yen, president of the Film Lab. Please, if you enjoyed today's podcast, subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts. Or if you're watching the podcast, please subscribe on Facebook or YouTube. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.